Welcome to Draft Utopia. Chris Ransom and Joseph Potter here today. Today we're going to be recapping NHL and NBA free agency. We'll also give you updates on the NBA draft at the end because you only got Joey's take on the first 15 picks. Not much happened in free agency for San Jose. I love their first three picks in the draft. Macklin Celebrini, Sam Dickinson, Igor Chernisov. I ended up giving them A grades for the rest of their picks, though. They got Leo Solid and Wallace at 53. I'm not sure. I had him going in the top 50, but he projects as a fourth line center. Projects as a number 4 center on a second line, a complementary center. He models his game after Miro Heiskanen. 96 in skating, 95 in power play, 95 offensive zones, and 94 in compete level consistency. He only had a 50 in penalty killing. That's the they also got Carson Wetch, who played with Macklin Celebrini at a young age in the third round. And, you know, that they got him at like pick 70. In the fifth round, they got Colton Roberts, a defenseman that I mocked at 66. Carson Wetch ended up going 82nd. I mocked Wetch at 70, but him and Celebrini and his cousins Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, but him and Celebrini played together as kids. And then Christian Kirch, a goalie from EV Zug, ended up going to the Sharks in round 4. I see him as a backup goalie, not a starter, but I could see him becoming a backup. The verdict's still out on him because Christian Kirch posted a 2.32 goals against average, a 9.11 save percentage with the EV Zug under 20 team. He's going to play for the Green Bay Gamblers. Then he's going to go to Massachusetts, where he'll back up second round pick Michael Hrabal in last year's draft. And then he'll start at UMass in 26 and 2027. I think Kirch is more of a long-term development backup type goalie. I do like the defenseman San Jose got in round 5. They got Colton Roberts, who I mocked at 65. Or 66 in the 5th round. They also got Nate Miskey, the same player I mocked to them. They got Roberts at 131, and they got Miskey at 143, where I mocked him. So just looking at the value, and then they got Yaroslav Korotstilev, a goalie that only started 6 games in the MHL against kids in Russia rather than men. Very raw goalie, could be the San Jose Barracuda future goalie in the AHL, but I don't see him making much of an impact in the NHL. But the 2.16 goals against average, 9.36 save percentage is encouraging. But yeah, San Jose, they really didn't do much in terms of their free agency. They added Tyler Toffoli. Toffoli had 70 points 2 years ago, but he's had 24 and 16 points. He did go on NHL Network and talk about mentoring the young guys, giving them advice. That's great and all, but the numbers in production has dipped. Are we going to see that resurgence from Toffoli this season? I'm going to say no, but we'll see. I feel like he's a little bit past his prime, but, you know, we'll see what happens with him. I'm going to get to the next team, the Chicago Blackhawks. Quite a bit happened with the Blackhawks. They were aggressive in free agency. There's also talks that Artyom Lashunov may in fact make the immediate jump to the NHL. There's been a lot of traction with him. I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. And, you know, you want to add anything to San Jose? Because I'm going to try to get through these. I feel like you've got more to say on the NBA free agency and the NBA draft in general. But the Blackhawks made things a lot more exciting in terms of free agency than San Jose. I'll say that much. With the Blackhawks, they went out, they got Tyler Bertuzzi. Tyler Bertuzzi, over $1 billion spent in free agency money this year. First time ever the NHL's exceeded $1 billion with every player, every free agent signing. Tyler Bertuzzi, he was a line 1 left winger on Boston when they won the President's Trophy in Toronto last year. He goes to Chicago. Teuvo Teravainen, a player that Kyle Davidson, the Blackhawks GM, was a limo driver for when he first worked there. He's now the first line right winger. He signs a contract with Chicago. Hall and Kurashev, who played in the top line last year, moved out of the second line with Frank Nazar. Lucas Reichel, Lucas Reichel, Jason Dickinson, and Ilya Mikheyev. A right winger the Blackhawks got from the Canucks are going to be on the third line. And then you have Patrick Maroon as the fourth line left winger. Craig Smith, Dallas Stars, fourth line right winger, signs a 1-year deal. Chicago also added Alec Martinez from the Vegas Golden Knights, a defenseman, to pair with Seth Jones for a year. Vlasic's going to move down to the second line with Korchinski. TJ Brody signed a 2-year deal. So Brody and Korchinski are going to compete for that number 4 defenseman job. But if Artyom Lashunov does in fact make the immediate jump to the Blackhawks like some are speculating as an 18-year-old, my guess is Lashunov would play on the second line this year and move up to the first line next year when Martinez's contract is up, and Brody and Korchinski would be on the third line. But that would be Mrazek's the starting goalie. They did bring in Laurent Brossoit, the backup on Winnipeg, and you do have Drew Commesso, the 2020 second-round pick, who looked good in the AHL. He will be ready to start by 2026 when both Mrazek and Brossoit are free agents. I do like what the Blackhawks have done this offseason, not just in terms of free agency, but in terms of their draft as well. I thought they had a strong free agency with some of the additions they made, like Bertuzzi, Teravainen, Alec Martinez from Vegas, Patrick Maroon, Craig Smith from the Dallas Stars. They got Mikheyev in a trade. It's TJ Brody from Toronto. I think they made some nice short-term moves as well as drafting good long-term assets. So John Mustard, another player I mocked to Chicago. He goes into them in the third round. AJ Spellecy, a player I mocked in the second round, is the other third-round pick. So I thought Chicago did a superb job drafting in rounds 1 through 3. And that's really my big takeaway here is I thought the Blackhawks, they didn't just hit on their 3 first-round picks. I feel like they got really good value, A-plus value, in rounds 1 through 3. And I think that's the big caveat here with the Blackhawks is they got value in rounds 1 through 3. And I thought they had a good free agency as well with some of the moves they made, some of the veterans they acquired. You're talking about guys who have multiple years of experience on the top line, like Teravainen, like Alec Martinez from Vegas, like Tyler Bertuzzi. Now, these are not guys that are going to move the needle, but they are serviceable first-line guys. They're not all-star, superstar type players, but these are serviceable first-line guys if you cannot get Porter Martone or Michael Misa, one of the wingers that's projected to be a superstar in next year's draft. These are serviceable veterans that complement Bedard quite well. So I thought the Blackhawks, they did a decent job for what they had to work with. I thought they did a fairly decent job as far as what they did in terms of their talent, in terms of the value they've brought in. So that's and then they got Jack Pridham in the third round. I really like the value they got. But again, really good value in free agency, really good value in the draft. I think the Blackhawks are heading in the right direction. If I had to make a guess, Joey, they're going to be picking in the 6 to 9 range next year. They won't make the playoffs, but I can't see them finishing in the bottom 5 simply because they made too many good decisions, not just in the draft, but in free agency. So, and they got a backup goalie. They got Martinez from Vegas, who's won 3 cups, 2 with the Kings, 1 with the Golden Knights. They got Bertuzzi, and Martinez is on like a 1-year deal for $4 million. So he's basically a stopgap until Levshunov's ready. And there's a chance Levshunov signs his contract and goes straight to the NHL because they haven't made a decision on that. I expect him to go back to Michigan State, but hey, I mean, there's a lot that could happen. Ty Henry. Yeah, and that's the thing with Bertuzzi and Teravainen, they're serviceable first-line wingers, but they're not star wingers. They can make Connor Bedard look good in the short term, but if you get the second or third pick in next year's draft, you can upgrade over them. So it's a good position to be in if you those are good additions. And Martinez is a stopgap until Ovchunov's done developing at Michigan State. That's another good move by the Blackhawks. So agreed. Yeah, in Anaheim, they're going to have Gauthier, Carlson, Killorn, Vetrano. They added Zegras is still on this roster. McTavish, Max Jones, they got him. He's the fourth line left winger. I mean, they have some pieces. They brought back Lundstrom, Fowler, and Mintyukov. We talked about Mintyukov, Zellweger, and Luneau for like 2 years now. We talked about those guys before they got to the NHL. Now they're in the NHL. Radko Gudas, veteran player they picked up last year from the Panthers, is back, and they got Brian Dumoulin in a trade with the Seattle Kraken. Dumoulin was Letang's number 2 defenseman in Pittsburgh for many years. Struggled with the Kraken, but he gets one more opportunity as an NHL player on the Ducks as a bottom line defenseman. And look, the Ducks have a lot of goalies. There was a lot of speculation about Gibson being traded. Lucas Dostal's going to remain the backup, but he's good enough to start. You also have Callie Klang, a 2020 third-round pick you got from Pittsburgh in the Raquel trade. And Damian Clara, a 2023 second-round pick, did sign his rookie deal. So the Ducks are in a great spot, but they just, I don't know. And I felt like they reached in this year's draft. And I'm not exactly sure what they did for free agency. I'll look that up and see what else they did. They got Dumoulin from Seattle, and Dumoulin was expendable at that point because Seattle did go out and get some other. Seattle did get Montour from Florida. We'll get to that later, but I think that signing that caused Dumoulin to become expendable because he was the number 6 guy on Seattle, and then you bring in Montour from the Panthers, so Dumoulin becomes expendable, and Anaheim only gave up a 4th round pick to get him, which is nothing. That is. Yeah, Montour was the biggest free agent signing. I'll get to Seattle in a little bit. I know Joey's segueing here. He does that sometimes, but it makes the show more fun. It makes the show more spontaneous. Whereas I'm more practical. I like to do everything in order, and I can see how that bores some people. But that's true. Yeah. Yeah. And I was not impressed with the Ducks draft. I thought Senecki was a reach. I thought Stolberg was a reach. As far as value goes, I think Ethan Proseason and Maxim Massey, their 2 third-round picks, may have been their best value picks. I also like the Terrence Smith pick in round 3. Alexander Blas in the 4th round was good value as well. I thought the Ducks did better in day 2 than they did. It really, rounds 3 through 4 were their best picks, but that's not going to be enough to move the needle because the odds are they're probably only going to hit on one of those picks. Don Waddell, very interesting draft with Columbus. Caden Lindstrom goes 4th. Evan Gardner, they trade up with Carolina to get Evan Gardner. They get Luca Morelli, a guy who's had experience in the first line in the 3rd round. They also get Tanner Hendricks. And Luke Ashton, who they took in the 6th round, also has experience on the top line. And they signed Sean Monahan to a 5-year contract. So Sean Monahan, Johnny Gaudreau, the line mates on the Calgary Flames for so many years, reunited in Columbus. And this is going to cause Boone Jenner, the team captain, to move down to the 2nd line with Voronkov and Igor Chinakhov. Cole Sillinger moves down to the 3rd line as a result, only had 32 points in 77 games. He will be line mates with Fantilli on the 3rd line, and then you're going to have Gavin Brindley, a 2023 2nd-round pick who actually played in the season finale, and then Kent Johnson's going to be on your 4th line. You're going to have Luca Del Bel Baluz, 22 2nd-round pick who got called up late in the year, and then you're going to have Justin Danforth and Matthew Denault competing for that right winger job. But Werenski and Provorov are going to be in the top line. Severson and Goodbranson are on the 2nd line. And Columbus let their 2 third-line defensemen walk. And now Jiricek and Matichuk, the 6th and 12th picks in 22, 2 defensemen I've been telling you about for 2 years, finally going to play on that Columbus Blue Jackets 3rd line. So I do like the additions. And I think right now, as much as I'd like to see Caden Lindstrom in the NHL, he may not come up till 2026 when Boone Jenner's a UFA. That may be the plan because they gave Monahan a 5-year deal to play with Gaudreau on that top line. And Boone Jenner could still be on the top line if he moves back to his original position at right wing, but we don't really know what's going to happen. And if he wants to stay at center, he's probably going to be on the 2nd line, play out his contract, and then they'll bring Caden Lindstrom up to compete with Fantilli at that point. And it's possible, if Jenner's never had 50 points in his career, it's possible Jenner gets traded next offseason before his contract runs out. That's also a possibility, but I like what Don Waddell's doing. I think Columbus is a year away. They have the talent to make the playoffs, but they don't have a head coach yet. That is what's going to hurt Columbus this year. They're the only team without a head coach at the moment, so I think that's what's going to hurt them this year. But I do think they have a very good future. And they did the same thing last year. We both liked the Mike Babcock hire, but they fired him before the start of the season. And then instead of waiting to fire the coach, Don Waddell waits until like the week of the draft to announce that they're moving on from the head coach. What? Yeah. Yeah. It's possible they're hiring Quenneville because on July 10th, Joel Quenneville is going to be reinstated. Joel Quenneville, former Blackhawks head coach, won 3 Stanley Cups. After the NHL found out that somebody on the Blackhawks got sexually assaulted, they suspended the GM and head coach indefinitely. But Gary Bettman's already came out and said that Joel Quenneville will be eligible to be reinstated on July 10th. It's possible Don Waddell's going to hire Quenneville. And if he does, I think they're a playoff team maybe next year. Maybe they get in his wild card too next year. But if they don't hire Quenneville and they get somebody else, I think they're going to suck next year until they get the right hire. That's what's frustrating about this Columbus team, Joey. That's what's frustrating about Columbus. Go ahead. And they are able to seek employment in the league, but they are not allowed to be hired by teams until July 10th. After reinstating GM Stan Bowman from the Blackhawks, Al McIsaac, and Joel Quenneville, they're able to seek employment, but teams are not allowed to hire them until July 10th. So they're... Yeah. I thought the Canadians did well in the first round, and I like the Atos Koivu pick in round 3. But a lot of the other picks, I'm kind of up in the air on at this point. Owen Protz could be decent 4th-round pick, but looking at Montreal, I mean, Montreal only made one free agency move. They brought in They re-signed Slafkovsky. Slafkovsky went number 1 overall 2 years ago in 2022, signed an 8-year, $60.8 million extension, which pays him $7.6 million a year. And Slafkovsky even came out and said it wasn't about the money. He would have signed for $7.5 million, but he got offered $7.6 million and he wanted to stay in Montreal. So they could have got him for less than what they paid him. But, you know, so it is a 8-year, $60.8 million. 60.8. Well, technically, NHL players can't test free agency until they're 26, 27, or 28, depending on the length of the contract. So he would have been an RFA, but Montreal wanted to pay him now. They figured to pay him now, he'll be happy, his morale will be high, he'll work harder, he'll want to stay with the team when his contract's up. He's 20. He's only 20, Joey. He's only 20. He went from 10 points as a rookie to 50 points this year, but he was red hot down the stretch. No, players in the NHL. He is mature. That's the thing with Slafkovsky. He was really nervous and humble in the interview process leading up to the 22 draft, whereas Shane Wright, he said he's the best player in the draft, and his confidence came across as cockiness, whereas Slafkovsky, he said he hopes to be number 1, he wants to work hard, do all this, but he sounded kind of nervous. He sounded he said the right things, but he sounded nervous, and I guess that Montreal took that as humility, confident but humble, so that's probably why they picked him. Yep. Yeah, and they're going to have Ivan Provorov next year, and there's people that believe Ivan Provorov is a tier above Slafkovsky, and they've got Cole Caulfield, who took the NHL by storm a few years ago. Montreal, I'm telling you, Joey, once they get Jacob Fowler, they have a chance to do something incredible. Owen Protz, I love that pick too in the 4th round, but, you know, the reality is Owen Protz isn't even going to see any ice time because Montreal's got so many good young defensemen. Caden Gould, 2020 first round pick. Justin Barron, he was Colorado's 2020 first round pick. They got him in the Arturi Lehkonen trade that sent Lehkonen to Colorado. Logan Malou, 2021 first-round pick. Lane Hudson, 22 second-round pick. I had a first-round grade on him. They've got those four in the NHL. They've got two other veterans complementing those guys. And when David Savard is a free agent next year, David Reinbacher, top 5 pick in last year's draft, will probably replace him. So, I mean, they're in a very good spot where I think they've got a playoff window as early as 25, 26. And I think when Fowler arrives, that playoff window could emerge into a Stanley Cup window for the Canadians. I've been saying this for a while. Hughes just has to keep adding talent. Yeah. And the reason Jake Ottinger's been so successful is because what Jim Nill did is he built up the blue line first. Drafted Miro Heiskanen, brought him up. He's a number 2 defender behind Klingberg and Lundell his rookie year. Then he plays in the top line with Klingberg the year they make the 2020 Cup. Then he becomes the number 1 guy the next year. And they've done the same thing with Thomas Harley. And they added a few more free agents this year. I'll get to Dallas in a little bit. But it feels like Montreal's doing the same thing Dallas did. Build up the blue line first with all these young guys. Then when Fowler's ready, we can go out and go on a run. That's kind of the vibe I'm getting. And they've already paid everyone on their top line. Suzuki, Caulfield, Slavkovsky. Everybody on their top line at forward's been paid. So they don't have to worry about that. Those contracts. All their first line forwards have signed contracts. So they don't have to worry about that right now. Yep. I mean, Utah Hockey Club, I felt like Utah Hockey Club needed to draft a first line defenseman, but they ended up trading for two first line defensemen instead in Mikhail Sergachev and John Marino. They did bring back Sean Dursey, their second line defenseman, on a 4-year deal, 24 million, 6 million per year, and they brought in Ian Cole. But Dmitry Simashev, who they drafted 6th overall, is going to be in Russia for another year. They did bring in Vali Maki, 2-year, $4 million extension. I do like the forwards on Utah. Problem is Utah, their goaltending sucks, and I feel like even though the blue line has improved, I don't think it's improved enough to move the needle and make a serious playoff push this year. They brought in Tisha Ginla. Fun fact, Shane Doan and Jerome McGinley were teammates when they played in the Western Hockey League before they got drafted in the 94 NHL draft. Their sons are both on Utah. Josh Doan getting adapted to Utah, and Tisha Ginla got drafted 6th overall by Utah. So the dads played together, junior. Now the kids are playing together whenever Tisha arrives in Utah. Yeah, and they ended up trading Connor Geeky, their 12th pick in 22, to the Tampa Bay Lightning in the Sergachev trade. They did draft Cole Boudoin, another first-line center, at 24. They got Thomas Lavoie in the 3rd round, Will Skahan in the 2nd round, Vitaly Vasanen in the 3rd round. They got some players, but how many of these defensemen are they going to end up hitting on in the draft? That's the million-dollar question. I'm not as confident they're going to hit on the defensemen they drafted as San Jose is. So that would be my big objection, but I do think Iginla has a chance to be a first-line left winger down the road. Especially outside the first round. Especially outside. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Let's go to Ottawa at number 7. They traded Matthew Joseph away, but they did get David Perron, who I think is an upgrade over Joseph in free agency. Ridley Greig, their 2020 their 2020 their second 2020 first round pick, remains the third line left winger. Pinto gets extended. Michael Amadio, a former Vegas Golden Knights, the third line right winger. Zach Ostapchuk, 2021 second round picks, the fourth line center. Thomas Chabot remains the number 3 defenseman. They got Nick Jensen, a defenseman from the Capitals, in a trade that sent Jacob Chichard to Washington. Chichard was Ottawa's second best defenseman, but he wasn't going to re-sign his contract with Ottawa. So they get Nick Jensen, and they get a third rounder from the Capitals in next year's draft. Jacob Bernard Docker, a 2018 second round, a 2018 first, Ottawa's second 2018 first round pick after Brady Tkachuk is the number 5 defenseman, and Tyler Kleven, a 2020 second round pick that I was a big fan of. He's going to be the number 6 defenseman on Ottawa next year over Travis Hamonic, and Hamonic's going to be Hamonic's going to be a number 7 defenseman in a depth role. They did trade for Linus Ullmark, Forsberg. There's a lot of people saying Ottawa can make the playoffs. I feel like Ottawa downgraded at too many positions. If they had kept Chichard, I think this would be a playoff team. If they had kept Joseph and moved him down to the third line, and then had Ridley Greig on the fourth line, and you keep Chichard, I think this is a playoff team. But they didn't make those moves. Eric Brandstrom only had 20 points. I understand the thought process in letting him walk. I do. But at the same time, I feel like for every big push move Ottawa made, they had just as big of a hiccup. And that sort of keeps the Ottawa Senators in purgatory, Joey. It's a shame because they have the talent to get to the playoffs on the top line with Tkachuk, Stützle, and Batherson. They have a really good first line of forwards. Stützle, he was drafted 3rd overall in 2020. I know his name's impossible to pronounce. They also have Brady Tkachuk, 4th pick in the 2018 draft, their captain. So they do have a lot of talent. And Brady Tkachuk's the younger brother of Matthew Tkachuk, who just won the Stanley Cup. And they might. And here's the thing. Everybody that Ottawa drafted is 6'2" or taller. They went for size, which has been the mantra in previous years, is to go for size over speed or physicality or upside. But they went for size in this draft. I feel like Yakimchuk provides stamina as well as size. Eliasson, I felt like it was a reach at 39. I am looking at some of their other picks outside of their top line guys. But, I think they're in an interesting spot. I did like Lucas Elias, the left winger they drafted. He was a top line guy. He's known for his shot and his work ethic. He's going to have to cut back on penalty minutes. He took 75 penalty minutes with the Kitchener Rangers. But I do like Lucas Elias. They also have Javon Moore. They got Blake Montgomery, a first line left winger on the Lincoln Stars. So they've got some pieces. I think Ottawa's in an interesting spot. They may make a push this year. They were 12th 2 years ago when they had Chichern, but I think they're an interesting team here, and I'll get to the Kraken. They signed Berkeley Catan, the number 8 pick in the draft. So if he will compete for roster spot, if he doesn't get it, he goes back to junior. But the Seattle Kraken made things a lot more interesting. Not just the Montour signing, which Joey praised. They also got Chandler Stevenson from the Vegas Golden Knights. That was another big move they made. So he's going to be competing with Jared McCann for a second line center job, and Stevenson got a 7-year deal. Ty Carty and Oliver Bjorkstander on that third line. Eli Tolvanen's back. Jade Schwartz. And Yanni Gord, who was the third line center for many years, gets demoted to the fourth line. So that literally leaves no room for Shane Wright. That means Shane Wright's going to have to play out his contract in the AHL. And if he wants a one-way contract, do you want to hand him that if Berkeley Catan outperforms him in camp this year? Probably not. So we're looking at a realistic scenario where if Shane Wright wants a one-way contract and refuses to sign with the Kraken, if they don't give him a one-way contract, they're going to have to trade him. Their hands are going to be tied, unfortunately. Yeah, and if he doesn't beat out Yanni Gord, one of them's gone. If you think about it, one of them's probably gone. I don't think they'll wait till next year to trade Wright. They'll probably do it this. Whoever loses that Gord Shane Wright competition for the fourth line center is probably getting dealt because Gord's in a contract year, and Shane Wright, as much as I'd like to see him succeed in Seattle, I feel like if he loses the competition to Gord, last year's third line center, then he'll just play out his rookie deal in Coachella Valley, and if he doesn't re-sign a two-way contract to where they can promote him to Coachella Valley or Seattle, they'll trade him. And someone will take a chance on Wright at that point. So yeah, he was on the Lightning when they won the Stanley Cups. He's a good player. He was I think a third line player when they won the 2 cups. And signing Montour elevates everybody because Vince Dunn was the number 1 defenseman. Now he's the number 2 defenseman on that first line. Adam Larson, number 2 defenseman on that first line, moves down to the second line with Will Borgen. They're both in contract years. And Jamie Oleksiak, number 5 defenseman, and Riker Evans, 2021 second round pick, are the 2 third line guys. And they've got Grubauer. They've got Joey Decord. And, they've already signed Berkeley Catan. But, Seattle loaded up at center. Berkeley Catan, Julius Meatinen, Nathan Villanueva. Look, I like some of the centers Seattle drafted, but people forget they got Tucker Robertson in the 4th round of the 22 NHL draft. He had 41 goals, 40 assists, and he fell to the 4th round. And he's still Tucker Robertson's great offensively, but he's not a defensive center. And I think the reason Seattle drafted so many centers is they want a defensive-minded center for that bottom line. That's become the new norm in the NHL now, Joey, is that 4th line center's got to be really good defensively, like an extra body. Yeah, and that last wild card in the Western Conference is going to be tight. I do have Vegas getting it at the moment, but I think Minnesota is going to provide stiff competition. I've got the Blues as my wild card one. I'll get to that later, but I think the Wild, the Kraken, and the Winnipeg Jets are all going to provide stiff competition for Vegas for that last wild card. They're going to get. I still think Vegas has enough stars to get it, but they're barely going to get it. It's going to come down to the wire just like last year. And a lot of it's going to come down to can Vegas stay healthy and stuff, because that's the thing. That's going to, if they get plagued with injuries like they did this year, I think somebody like Seattle or Minnesota can jump them for that last wild card. And I'll get to why I feel that way a little bit later. Yeah, they couldn't stay healthy down the stretch when it really mattered the most. So that's the thing I'm looking at here with a lot of these teams. And number 9, I'm just trying to think who. New Jersey had 10. Who picked ahead of New Jersey? I think it was Calgary. Yeah, it was Calgary. Calgary signed both of their first round picks. So not only is Zane Parekha under contract, Matvei Greedon was supposed to go to Michigan. He led the Muskegon Lumberjacks in goals and points. He's supposed to go straight to Michigan, but Calgary liked Matvei Greedon so much, they already signed him to a contract, which means he's going straight to the Calgary Wranglers in the AHL as an 18-year-old. Straight to the pros. That's how much they liked him. They were like, you know what? We're going to give you a contract and see if you choose that over college. And he took the contract. So good for him. And Calgary's got both their 2 first-round picks on those contracts. But with Zane Parekha, if he goes back to Saginaw for a year or two, he can still develop in Saginaw, and that contract goes into effect later, whereas Green's contract's going to go into effect right now because Calgary decided to sign this guy instead of let him go to college. So, yeah. That is the big thing I noticed with that contract, and I thought Calgary had a good draft for the most part. I do. I really liked what Calgary did with their draft. Calgary, not only did they sign their first and second round picks, no, they signed their first round picks. I like what the Flames did. Conroy had a great draft for Calgary. They got Andrew Basha, who had a first-round grade on at 41. Jacob Battaglia. Yeah, I know I mocked him in round 5, but I think he's an excellent fit. Henry Muse, a power play specialist, another offensive defenseman to complement Parekha. Kirill Zarubin in Russia had good numbers. Trevor Hoskin was the CJHL MVP. Luke Misa, 5th round. I had him in the 2nd. Hunter Lang, another player I had going early. I thought Calgary and Eric Jameson's a line one. Well, Jameson was a first-line defenseman. I thought Calgary had an amazing draft. They got some core pieces for their identity, and they signed their 2 rookies. They really didn't do anything in terms of free agency. So they did bring in Jake Bean, the 3rd-line defenseman from Columbus, but they really didn't do anything in terms of free agency. They are building for the long run in Calgary. So I mean, do we want to say anything else about Calgary? I thought they had an amazing draft. I'll show you guys some of the picks, some of the write-ups I did in my draft results webpage on the live stream. But I really feel like they really didn't do much in free agency, whereas a team like New Jersey did a lot more. And, I'm sure people would rather hear about what New Jersey did. So I'm just showing our audience some of the picks Calgary made on the live stream until Joey calls back in, and then we'll get to New Jersey. I did not think it would take this long to go through the top 10, but you know how we are. You know how we rant about teams, certain picks. I did like the Luke Misa pick. I'll put that right up here. Older brother of Michael Misa. And once I get to New Jersey, I'll check to see if anybody commented in the chat room. I'm sure they did. I'm sure I completely missed it. But yeah, Hunter Lang, really nice value in round 6 for Calgary. And let me see my phone here. Yeah, so Hunter Lang, really good addition here. I'm going to check my phone to see what's going on with Joey. See if there is I'm guessing it's just like a technical issue on his end. And yeah, Eric Jameson. So yeah, Calgary had some great picks. New Jersey, they did get Anton Silyev, but I felt like Silyev was really the only home run draft pick this front office made. Maybe I'm being a little too harsh on the Devils, but Silyev, he's in Russia. I don't think he's going to be up for a few years. But outside of Silyev, who was my number 2 player back in February, they got Pickering, they got Traff. These are guys who could be decent bottom line players. Silyev was really the only home run pick for me as far as the Devils go. And the New Jersey Devils, they brought in Tomas Tatar. They brought in Stefan Nosen. They brought in Brett Pesce from Carolina. Kovacevic, they brought Jonathan. They traded for Kovacevic. So, they signed Colton White. They made a few decent moves, and they traded for Markstrom from Calgary. They gave up a 2025 first-round pick for Calgary. And these are good moves in hindsight, but I really don't feel like they did enough to they did enough to remain playoff contenders, but I also feel like they didn't do enough to move the needle as Stanley Cup contenders. So again, we'll see what happens there. But with New Jersey, they drafted Anton Silyev at 10. They get Brett Pesce from Carolina. I don't like the addition of Brendan Dillon. Markstrom's a good addition. They do have guys on this roster, but I really feel like the Devils could have done more. They did enough to be a playoff team, but I don't feel like they did enough to be a Stanley Cup contender. And a lot of people have them as the number 2 team in that division behind Carolina. I think the Islanders and Rangers are the 2 best teams in the Metro this year. I've got the Devils at 3 right now. But again, it's early. It's still very early in the process. There's a lot that could happen. The big trade happened yesterday. Big trade between Buffalo and Edmonton happened yesterday. I want to get Joey's take on this. I do like the Jason Zucker free agency signing, Nicholas Aube-Kubel, Rathbone. I do like some of the moves they made. There was a huge trade, though. Okay. Much Jacob Bryson's back. Sandstrom Sam Lafferty, 2 years, $4 million. Just going over some of the contracts. Buffalo did make a big trade, though. They traded Matthew Savoy and Tyler Tullio to get Ryan McLeod. So, and Tyler Tullio and McLeod go to Buffalo. Matthew Savoy, the 9th pick in the 22 NHL draft, goes to Edmonton. And if Savoy reaches that all-star ceiling he had coming out of that draft, Edmonton's going to look like geniuses because Savoy, they can plug him into a third-line center role next year, and he might thrive in that role, and there won't be much of a drop-off. So Edmonton could be one of these teams that just, as long as they can re-sign McDavid and Draisaitl, they're still going to have a window to win multiple cups. How many teams can you say that about right now? Okay. We do not have notes from anybody, but we have 25 people in the chat. Very well. Buffalo, they traded down from 11 to 14. They got Consta Hellenis. Love that pick. Adam Kleber in round 2 is another pick I was a big fan of. Kleber. I'll just run through these teams until Joey gets the Wi-Fi to call back in. And he just might, because Kleber's one of these guys that 2 points, 5 games. I really like the Kleber pick in round 2. Number 1 defenseman on the Lincoln Stars. They also get Brody Zemer. But the big trade was, they got Brody Zemer in round 3. I really like the value there. They got Osborne in round 4. So just looking at the overall value, some of these picks. And yeah, they got Osborne in the 4th round. I really like the value there. And they got Simone. I was not a fan of the Simone Pierre Brunette pick. I did like the Ryderson Linders pick in the 7th round. You get him as a backup to Ukko-Pekka Rainen and Devin Levi. That is really good value in the 7th round because in February, he was the number 2 goalie in the draft. Ryerson Linders. He was the number 2 goalie in the draft back in February. So you get him in the 7th round. That is amazing value. So that's all I'm going to say on that one. And I'm going to get to the Flyers here. So yeah, before we get to the Flyers, I want to get your thoughts on the trade that happened yesterday because I just broke down Buffalo. Buffalo traded Matthew Savoy, the 9th pick in the 22 Edmonton draft that I had in my top 5, to the Edmonton Oilers. And the return was Ryan McLeod, a 2016 first-round pick who's an experienced but meh center on the 3rd line, and Tyler Tullio, a 2020 5th-round pick. And just like that, Matthew Savoy is in Edmonton. And if he comes up to the NHL next year, he gets to learn under McDavid and Draisaitl in the 3rd line. There's not a lot of pressure on him. That's a great spot for him to be in. And I honestly feel like Edmonton fleeced Buffalo. Yeah, he had 90 points in his draft year. He improved on that to 95 points. I know he only had 24 points last year. He dealt with an injury for most of the season. there is no, and then he got traded to Moose Jaw, and he still put together 47 and 24. That's 71 points in 34 games. That is remarkable production. 71 points in 34 games. So even though he missed a lot of time with injuries, yeah. And that's just the regular season, Joey. He had 24 points in 13 playoff games with the Moose Jaw Warriors, the eventual WHL champions. Well, the other thing is Matthew Savoy's older brother, Carter, was drafted by Edmonton. Not trying to interrupt, but Matthew Savoy's older brother, Carter, was drafted by Edmonton. Most had a second-round grade on him. He fell to the fourth round, but Matthew Savoy was a lot more talented than his brother, and now they're teammates in Edmonton. I was about to put the Buffalo Sabres in the playoffs, and then they make this trade, and Kevin Adams is like, well, I think the Sabres are heading in the right direction, but me and Brandon Bean, with all due respect, we do things a little bit differently in Buffalo. Now you look like you have freaking egg on your face after making those comments at the NHL draft. You look like you have freaking egg yolk on your face. It's like, it's not a good look, Kevin. I love what you've done with the Sabres up to this point, but then trading Savoy, now you look like you have egg on your face. I'm sorry. I don't know how else to put it. I don't get it either, man. It is. And that's the thing. Savoy, you can play him in the minors this year with all the depth Edmonton has at center from their free agents. And then next year will be your third line center behind McDavid and Draisaitl if you re-sign both of them. And he's still going to be on a rookie deal making like $875,000 for the next 3 years. Are you kidding me? That's highway robbery in my opinion. As a Dallas Stars fan, I just want to say I'm extremely offended by the actions Kevin Adams takes. It's almost like he and every Sabres fan in the country are giving us the middle finger for the 99 Stanley Cup. Because you're handing Edmonton more talent to screw us out of a Western Conference Finals for the next 15 years. Why? Yeah. You know what this is, Joey? This is the equivalent of the Cleveland Guardians drafting a really good player at number 1 and then trading him to the Yankees before he enters arbitration. That's basically what this is, with the Sabres trading Savoy away to Edmonton. You're getting an older player and a 2025th round pick back. And frankly, that is too little value to get back for a player you drafted 9th overall in 2022 who was in the top 5 of that draft class but fell to you at 9. That is way too little to get back. I could have Yep. Yep. It I thought Buffalo had some good draft picks in rounds 1 through 4 until at 14, 42, 71, 108, but it won't matter if they trade them away in 2 years from now. But yeah, Philadelphia, they did not do much in free agency. Re-signed Bobby Brink. They gave Mitch Cobb a rookie deal. They re-signed Garnett Hathaway. They signed Eric Johnson, former Avalanche defenseman, to a 1-year, $1 million contract. They're in a rebuild. There's really not much to say about the Flyers. I do like Frost, Farabee, Konechny. I do like some of the players in their identity, but I really there's not much to say about the Flyers when you really put everything in hindsight. I mean, the Flyers are in a rebuild. It is what it is. I think I should just get to Minnesota now. I do want to update like the draft year for some of the players in my write-ups, but the write-ups are already lengthy enough. There's really no need for me to do this, but I'm gonna do it, and then I'll get to Minnesota here. Um, I think Konechny is actually the. I can't even remember if Frost. So it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter right now. We'll get to Minnesota because Philadelphia, Minnesota at least has a chance to be competitive. And I pull up Minnesota here, and they're showing all the Dallas Stars signings. I don't understand what's going on here. I pull up the Minnesota Wild's free agency moves, and they're basically showing all the Dallas Stars signings. I get that the Minnesota North Stars relocated to Dallas, but I didn't know that the Minnesota Wild also relocated to Dallas because they're showing all the Dallas Stars free agent signings with the Wild. It's like, Spotrac, what the heck was going on, guys? Um, but yeah, they did bring they gave Jacob Middleton a 4-year extension. They brought back Yakov Trenin. So they've re-signed a few guys. Nothing crazy, nothing spectacular. And with Middleton getting re-signed, the top 4 is going to remain the same. And, Zeb William probably will be up in the NHL, but he'll probably replace John Merrill on the third line and be eased into things. Same could be said with Aaron Kiviharju. I loved both of those draft picks by the Wild. I thought the Minnesota Wild a great draft, but they got 2 first-round talents on the blue line, Kiviharju, and they got multiple first-round talents. So, I mean, I can't really complain. They got Sebastian Cioni. They got Ryder Ritchie in the second round, Chase Wouzier, and they got Stevie Leskovar. So I thought the Minnesota Wild, their draft was pretty good. I think the Wild had one of the better drafts. Every pick they made ended up getting an A+ grade. I thought they had a great draft. I just wish we could see what free agency moves they made. So it's a shame, but I guess we're going to go to the Penguins now because the Penguins had an amazing draft as well. Penguins were another team like the Wild and LA Kings to get all A+ grades on every single pick in the draft. Penguins, they brought in Sebastian Aho, former Islanders draft pick, 2-year, $1.55 million deal. They brought in Anthony Beauvillier, 1-year, $1.25 million deal. They brought in Matthew Grzelcyk from the Bruins third line, 1-year, $2.75 million deal. They traded for Kevin Hayes. They gave up a 2025 second. They gave up Pierre-Olivier Joseph to the Blues for Kevin Hayes and a 2025 second round pick. They get a second from the Blues. I thought the Penguins had an amazing draft. They got Harrison Bernicki, number 1 defenseman on Kamloops Blazers. Tanner Howe. They got Tanner Howe, player in my top 40 at 46. They got Chase Patella in the 4th round. Michigan Tech defenseman, number 1 defenseman on Michigan Tech. Jonah Vasanen, Dubuque Fighting Saints defenseman, number 1 defenseman in the 6th round. Max Swanson, who I wouldn't shut up about last week at 207. And Finn Harding, number 1 defenseman on Mississauga at 223. So they got 4 number 1 defensemen in one draft. They still have Owen Pickering, their 22 first-round pick, team captain of the Swift Current Broncos, and another number 1 defenseman. So the Penguins have 5 number 1 defensemen on junior hockey league teams in their prospect pool, thanks to this draft. But really, not a lot of signings that move the needle. Blake Lizode's decent. Grzelcyk's decent. But a lot of these guys, feel like stopgaps with all the prospects the Penguins have in their pool coming up. And NHL Network's trying to create drama, saying the Penguins should trade Sidney Crosby because he's coming up at the end of his career. And, if they're not in a position to contend, they should just trade him and just start the rebuild. Do you really think the Penguins are going to trade Crosby? These guys at NHL Network, you thought their analytics charts were bad compared to my draft analysis, Joey? Some of these guys think they're going to trade Crosby away. And they made that the focus point of day 1 of free agency when that should not even be a focus point. It's like, what are we doing here, NHL Network? I'm sorry, Joey. I don't think Crosby's getting traded. I'm not going to say he's going to get extended right now, but I think all this talk of Yeah, and here's an interesting note by Pat Brisson, Crosby's agent, said, Crosby is loyal but wants to win a cup again before he retires. Pens might not have what it takes. Well, that's terrifying. That's basically what Brisson said. So, I don't know. I don't really know what's going to happen here. And here's the thing. After Crosby got extended past his rookie deal, he took a team-friendly $8.7 million deal when he was worth $10 million. Coming off of... he signed a 12-year contract on July 1st, 2012 for $8.7 million a year. When he was the best player in the league, when McDavid wasn't in the NHL yet, and he was worth $10 million at least at the time when he signed that 12-year, $8.7 million contract. Okay? At least. So I know you don't want to pay Crosby, but he took a hometown discount, a massive one. So I get it. I get him wanting to get paid. And I do think he'll get paid, but like, I don't think this is a story. I mean, it is kind of a story, but it's also kind of a non sequitur. So that's why I'm not really commenting much on it. I do like what the Penguins did in the draft. Don't get me wrong. I love what they did in the draft. Brunicki, Howe, Chase Patella in the 4th round. I'll show you the write-ups, but, you know, we're going to get to the Red Wings soon because the Red Wings brought back Patrick Kane. The Red Wings also signed a good veteran. They did. They brought in a really good veteran player, Chase Patella. Not Chase Patella. That's the player the Penguins drafted. But yeah, looking at the Red Wings, they did make some moves here. They brought in Vladimir Tarasenko from the Panthers on a 2-year, $9.5 million deal. They brought in Jack Campbell for depth at goalie. They traded Robbie Fabry for Gage Alexander, a 2025 4th-round pick. They brought in Cam Talbot. So they brought in Patrick Kane. They brought in Kane and Tarasenko are going to be on that Red Wings second line. And Marco Kasper, who was drafted ahead of Savoy, is also going to be in the NHL this year. I think the Red Wings are a legitimate dark horse for Wild Card 1. They were close last year. I think the Red Wings are a team a lot of people are writing off right now that they shouldn't. And I wasn't a big fan of Detroit's draft, but I thought they handled free agency relatively well. And I also feel like Yzerman's due for a playoff appearance with the Red Wings. So right now the Red Wings are wild card 1, Joey. You got anything you want to say about the Red Wings? They brought in Tarasenko. They brought back Kane. Tarasenko was on Florida as a third-line right winger. He's now in a top 6 role again. They brought back Cam Talbot and Jack Campbell. So they've got 4 goalies competing for the starting job, and Costa and Augustine are in their prospect pool. I mean, I felt like they could have had a better draft. I thought the Red Wings had one of the more underwhelming drafts. And this is the 3rd year in a row where I felt this way. I loved what Yzerman did his first 2 years, but the last 3 years I felt like have been somewhat underwhelming for the Red Wings. So that's all I'm going to say on that. And Who is number 16? I know the Capitals have 17. I just don't remember at the top of my head who had number 16. I'm sure I'll get it eventually. Blues. The Blues had number 16. And the Blues had a very good offseason, in my opinion. They were able to extend Pavel Buchnevich, their first line left winger. Robert Thomas and Kyrou are on that top line. Brandon Saad remains second line left winger. Schen's the second line center. Jake Neighbors is the second line right winger, 2020 first round pick. I was a big fan of Neighbors coming out of the Edmonton Oil Kings. He should not have dropped as far as he did in his draft year, and I think Edmonton already signed Jiricek, Adam Jiricek, the younger brother of David Jiricek, who they drafted 16th overall. They've already signed to his rookie contract, so I do think they're in a good spot. As far as the talent goes, they have Matthew Joseph. They got in a trade with Ottawa. They got Alexander Texier, the fourth line left winger from Columbus. He's the third line center. Alexei Torpachenko's the third line right winger. Nathan Walker is the fourth line left winger. They got Radek Faksa from Dallas on a one-year deal, and they got Kapanen. So I do like what they did, and they brought in Pierre-Olivier Joseph from Pittsburgh to complement their veterans like Falk, Krug, Nick Leddy, Parayko, Perunovic on the third line. I think I've got the Blues as my wild card one. As bold as that sounds, Joey, right now the St. Louis Blues are my wild card one. That could change, but, I like what the Blues did this year. I think they got some pieces. I like the fact that Doug Armstrong said some young guys are exceeding our expectations. Older guys are underperforming. Pretty much says that before the draft to try to light a fire under everyone's ass. I think the Blues, right now, they're my wild card one, and I would have them playing Dallas in the first round of the playoffs based on where my bracket is, where I have the Blues projected to pick. I like the Lucas Fisher pick at the end of round 2. Andrej Koss was good value. Adam Jetcho, good value in round 3. Mercick, William McIsaac in round 5. Antoine Dorian. Fair enough. I thought the Capitals had a strong draft. They did sign their first round pick. They traded for Jacob Chichern. I don't think that's enough to move the playoff needle as far as the Washington Capitals go. Their big weakness was on the blue line on defense. I do like the move to trade for Chichern. And I like Cole Hudson in the second round, Protas in the third, Eric Matejko in the third round as well. Peter Sikora and Miroslav Satan in round 6 and 7. Really good value picks by the Capitals, but not enough to move the needle for me to say they're a playoff team this year. I don't feel like they did enough in that respect. Yeah. And Anthony Duclair signs with the Islanders. The Islanders are the next team I'm going to preview. And they got Anthony Duclair in free agency on a 4-year, $14 million contract. I believe Duclair was with the Rangers and the Lightning last year. Yeah, Duclair was drafted by the Rangers, but he played for the Lightning last year, only 15 points in 17 games. He had more points in San Jose, and he was on a few of those Florida teams that made the Florida team that won the President's Trophy. He had a career high 58 points on that team, but it just hasn't been the same since then. And we'll see what happens with Duclair. I'm not exactly sure what the Islanders are thinking, giving him $14 million over 4 years. Looking at the analytics now, I'm trying to be fair and objective towards the Islanders, but that's a move that baffles me because he only had 6 points with the Lightning, and you're really going to pay him for. If you gave him a 2-year deal, I could understand it. I really don't understand this. The Islanders don't really lose a lot of key guys, but they didn't have a lot of money to spend either. So they go out, they get Duclair, and I probably do need to update this because Duclair is going to be on the Islanders for the next 4 years. So, and I really don't understand that move when you have Cole Eiserman, when you have Anders Lee, a team captain, as a 2026 UFA. I really don't understand neglecting that area of your team. And, Casey Cizikas is going to be the third line left winger. Okay, so yeah, Anthony Duclair is the second line left winger now. I guess that does make a little bit more sense, but yeah. Duclair was really the only big move for the Islanders. We'll get to the Vegas Golden Knights. They did lose a lot of pieces. They lost their leading scorer, Marchessault. They lost a lot. They did trade for Alexander Holtz, the New Jersey Devils' 7th overall pick in the draft. They also signed Victor Olofsson, 4th line right winger on the Sabres. They signed Robert Haig, $775,000. They signed Akira Schmid. They signed Ilya Samsonov from the Capitals and the Maple Leafs. Ilya Samsonov, backup goalie now. But yeah, I mean, they traded Logan Thompson. They traded Akira Schmid. They traded someone to New Jersey, I believe Paul Cotter, for Akira Schmid and Alexander Holtz. I think they won that trade. They're doing the best they can. I think wild card 2 is a possibility. But I could also see the Golden Knights missing the playoffs. They'll have a lot more money to spend next offseason. They're just cash strapped this year. Right now, they're cash strapped. I get why Elliot Friedman's complaining about how they're not doing what they usually do. I get it. I get where he's coming from, but at the same time, they are cash strapped this year. That's why they've had to replace a lot of star players with third, fourth line guys. But even though I don't like the fact that Vegas beat us in the Western Conference Finals, we beat them this year. They were good sports about it. Their players were. I'll give them respect for that. I like Connolly, Moisevich, Swick, and Van Vliet. Vegas had a good draft despite only having 4 picks, and they got some good free agents. So I don't think you can be too critical on the Vegas Golden Knights as far as their outlook goes. And even if you just like their free agency moves, they still didn't screw up as badly as the Tampa Bay Lightning. Lightning, I think they are heading for a rebuild. They cleared up cap space to try to bring back Stamkos, but they wanted Jake Getzel instead because he's younger. So they paid Jake Getzel 7 years, $9 million a year for $63 million. And the Lightning only gave up a third-round pick for Gensel in 2025, and they let Stamkos walk, and they got nothing back for him. And I'm going to get to Stamkos in a bit because Nashville was my huge winner. But, the Lightning, I feel like they're heading for a rebuild. I think they have too much talent with Hedman, Vasilevsky, Hagel, Getzel, Kucherov. They have too much talent to pick in the top 10 of the draft, but they feel like the Penguins where they're going to be stuck in that 11 through 16 range for the next 2 years because they got rid of Stamkos. And there's Lightning fans that are still pissed off about that. I know because Tony Mario's brought it up. I think they drafted, Jan Golchich from Gatineau, line one defenseman, Hagen Burnos, Minnesota, Mr. Hockey in Minnesota. I thought they hit on both of their fourth-round picks, but they didn't draft until the fourth round, and they're kind of in a tough spot right now. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with the Lightning. But I felt like they should have taken care of Stamkos, and giving him only $3 million a year, that's incredibly insulting, especially when you clear up $11 million in cap space and you make no attempt to renegotiate that deal. But I think the Lightning figured if we can't get Stamkos, our next best play is to pivot and get younger, and they go with Jake Gensel. So, it's going to be interesting to see what the Lightning do this offseason without their captain, and I would figure Kucherov's going to be the new captain. Caden Petir, they got some good players, but I also feel like they underachieved as far as I just wish they had ended things differently with Stamkos. It felt like they burned some bridges, but yeah, LA Kings, we'll get to the LA Kings. They were one of the teams that crushed this year's draft. They brought in Cam Atkinson. They gave Victor Hedman a 4-year, $32 million deal, which is basically what Nashville paid Stamkos. They gave that to Victor Hedman. The LA Kings got Warren Fogle from the Oilers, 3 years, $10.5 million. They got Joel Edmondson, $15.4 million for 4 years. Those are really the two big moves the Kings made as far as improving their roster and free agency. And I thought the Kings had a great draft. I mean, Liam Greentree, Carter George, we talked about those two, but they also got Jared Woolley and James Reeder. The Kings were one of the teams with the perfect draft. I'm not going to go into detail about it because if you listen to pick by pick in the live stream, I guess I can show you guys the picks on the screen, but, I broke this down on last week's live stream with the Kings perfect draft, but I didn't go into grave detail about it. So I'm going to quickly show you the write-ups on Restream, and then we're going to go to the Nashville Predators because the Nashville Predators were the big winner. I think they've closed the gap between them, Colorado, and Dallas. I really do believe that. And they got, because Nashville, not only did Nashville get Jonathan Marchessault, they got Stamkos. So not only did they get Stamkos, they got Jonathan Marchessault, leading point scorer on Vegas. They also got Wedgwood, the Dallas Stars backup goalie, as their backup. So Askarov's going to remain in Milwaukee. And on top of that, they got Brady Skej, the number 3 defenseman on the Hurricanes. I think they paid him a little too much, 7 years, $7 million, but I mean, Carolina's been one of the more consistent teams. I could see why Skej would command a big payday, but they paid him. And it's funny because after Nashville made all these signings, Urinating Tree tweeted that some of these teams are going to be kicking themselves with all these signings in a year from now because NHL teams spent over $1 billion on free agency. I don't think he's wrong. And Skej might be one of those players they end up kicking themselves on, but they have Fabro and Roman Yossi on the top line. Skej can be a serviceable number 3 there. And they paid Saros too. They gave Saros an 8-year contract. They brought in a backup for Saros and Wedgwood. They brought in they gave Brady Skej, a number 3 defenseman, a 7-year contract. Here's a rule of thumb. When you have a guy like Dante Fabro, your 2016 first-round pick, who's in a contract here, who's a reliable first-line defenseman, you pay him before you hand out 7-year contracts to second-line defensemen. That is a basic rule in economics, Joey. I guess Barry Trotz didn't get the memo. Fabro's 26. He was the Nashville Predators' 17th pick. Fabro went 17th overall in the 2016 NHL draft. He's 26. He'll be 27 next year when he's a UFA. I don't understand not extending Fabro. You could have still gotten Skej for like 3 years and extended Fabro, and that would have been a lot smarter business decision because Fabro, he's got multiple years of experience on the top line, and when Roman Josi retires, you're going to need Fabro. So I really don't get the thought process with paying Brady Skej. I love the Stamkos and Marchessault additions, but Brady Skej is 30, and you're handing him a 7-year contract. That is not going to age well. He's already got gray hair. Not only is he 30, he's already got gray hair. And you're handing him a 7-year contract. Yeah, so Marchessault, Vegas right winger that led the team in points, 5 years, $27.5 million. Stamkos, 4 years, $32 million. Brady Skej, 7 years, $49 million. Skej had 47 points last year. Fabro, even though he's got multiple years of experience in the top line, he's never really exceeded 30 points in an NHL season for a defenseman. So I get the thought process. Bring in a more offensive-minded defenseman and pay him big money. I don't agree with it, but I get the thought process there. Carrier, 3 years, $11.25 million. Jacob Lucchini, 2 years, $1.55 million. Kiefer Bellows. So they made a lot of moves. Nashville, I think, positioned themselves to where they're a top 3 team in the Central. But at the same token, I really don't feel like they moved the needle as far as the draft goes. Um, and there was an opportunity to do something incredible here. I don't think they pulled the trigger in that respect. Toronto's a team that did have a nice free agency, in my opinion. Toronto, they got Chris Tanev from Dallas. Dallas traded Tanev, their best shot blocker, to Toronto because Toronto was willing to offer him a 6-year deal. He's 34. Dallas didn't want to pay a 34-year-old a 6-year contract, so they traded him away to Toronto. And Oliver Ekman-Larsson, who won a Stanley Cup with Florida, 4 years, $14 million in Toronto. Stolar's backup goalie in Florida goes to Toronto, 2 years, $5 million. Hakanpää, former Dallas defenseman, 2 years, $3 million, despite a knee injury, which is the reason Dallas moved on from him. Max Domi, 4 years, $15 million. He was on the Stars when they lost to Vegas. Timothy Liljegren, 2 years, $6 million. Toronto's made a lot of big moves. They gave their starting goalie, Joseph Woll, 3 years, $10.98 million. Matt Murray, the backup goalie last year, 1 year, $875,000. Toronto's made a lot of big moves. I think they are the team that's best positioned to win the Eastern Conference. But Matthews, Marner, Tavares, they have to put everything together next year. There's no, we lost in overtime in the first round, or we made it to the second round, but we lost to Florida in 5 games. No, that's not going to cut it. You got a Stanley Cup winning head coach in Craig Berube. You actually have to get to the cup with this team. You don't have to win the cup, because I think Edmonton, Dallas, Colorado, even Nashville might beat Toronto, but I think Toronto's best chance of winning the cup would be to draw Nashville. I think that's the one team in that group of 4 you can beat. So, yeah. But Toronto, you actually have to do something. Drouin resigns with Colorado. Eric Brandstrom leaves Ottawa, signs with Colorado. Jack Johnson signs with Colorado. I mean, Jonathan Drouin resigns. Kiviranta. Not a lot of big moves by Colorado, but they are getting Landeskog back from 2 knee injuries. They're going to have Nichushkin back next year. That's one of the big reasons why they are the favorite. They drafted a goalie in the first round, Ilya Nabokov, player that had really good statistics. I like that pick. I like the Jake Fisher pick in round 4, Torrey Pittner in round 6, Maximilian Curran in round 5, and Humphreys in round 7. I thought the Avalanche had some really good picks despite reaching on William Zellers. And I don't see a move the needle type move by Colorado. Yeah, if they're fully healthy, they can knock out Dallas, but they're probably going to be the 3 seed because we don't know when Landeskog's coming back from his 2 knee injuries and Nichushkin's suspended for the first half of the season. So they're probably going to be like the number 3. I think they could go on a playoff run, but they're probably going to be the 3 seed again behind Dallas and Nashville. And if they get a higher seed and their roster's fully healthy, they can go on a run to the conference finals. Okay, I'm not saying they can't. They are certainly capable of that. I just got to see it from Colorado, and right now I don't see it. Bruins really didn't do much. They got Nikita Zadorov, a defenseman from Vancouver, 6 years, $30 million, and they got Elias Lindholm from Vancouver, 7 years, $54.25 million. That's it. And really not a lot of big moves by the Boston Bruins. I did like their decision to draft Dean Letourneau. Letourneau is going straight to Boston College, Joey. He's not going to be pampered like I originally anticipated. He is going straight to Boston College, and then he'll go from Boston College to Providence or the Boston Bruins if he cracks their roster down the road. So he's not going to be pampered. I'm sure you feel a little bit better about that now after going to St. Andrews Prep. I'm sure you feel a little bit better about him not being spoiled or pampered or whatever. Um, Winnipeg, they got a few free agents on cheap deals, but nothing exciting as far as moving the needle goes. And they didn't have a first round pick. I thought they reached for Frazier in the second round. We're on 26. I'm trying to think of who's at 27. Calgary got their first round pick from Vancouver. So Vancouver's Yeah, we hope everybody in Jacksonville is safe. Carolina lost 12 different players to free agency, and they only made 5 additions. And they drafted poorly for the first time in 5 years. I think this is the Dom Waddell effect because Columbus had a really good draft under Waddell, and this is the fallout of losing Don Waddell. I mean, Bradley Nadeau, their 30th overall pick in last year's draft, is expected to be the second line left winger. They did do a nice job reloading it forward, but they gave Jacob Slavin, their first line defenseman, who's young, an 8-year extension. Martinuk, Tyson Yost, William Carrier, who Dallas was rumored to be signing, got a 6-year, $12 million deal. Shane Gostabert, 3-year, $9.6 million. Sean Walker, 5-year, $18 million. I think the Hurricanes overpaid for a lot of these defensemen. And without Waddell, they really didn't know what the hell they were doing. So they overpaid for a lot of these guys. I mean, Carolina would be my big loser because they only signed 5 players. They lost 12 players to free agency, and they overpaid on pretty much every signing outside of extending Jacob Slavin, their best defenseman. They didn't extend Svechnikov yet, they extended Svechnikov, but they didn't extend Martin Nikas. They're probably going to trade him, but I just feel like Carolina overachieved as far as free agency goes. Or underachieved, actually. DeBrusque got a 7-year, $38.5 million deal with Vancouver. Vancouver needed a second line center to replace Elias Lindholm. They didn't get that in the draft or free agency. So now you got to move Elias Lindholm and JT Miller. Miller can play right wing as well as center, and he's more lethal on the same line as Elias Peterson. But because you neglected that line 2 center, you got to move Peterson or Miller down to the second line. I think that makes Vancouver less lethal to a degree. So that I had Riley Patterson going to Vancouver in round 4. They get him. They got Anthony Romani as well. I love those picks. Parker Alkos in round 6 was another good pick. So those 3 picks by Vancouver were good selections. Anything you want to say about Carolina or Vancouver? Because I felt like both of those teams underachieved as far as free agency goes this past year. And if Joey's not saying anything, it's because of the accident and what he saw in Jacksonville. But I'll give him a few minutes to regroup and say what he wants to say about Carolina and Vancouver, and then we'll get to Dallas. We'll get to Dallas, the Rangers, Florida, and Edmonton. We'll get to what they did. I hope Joey's okay. I hope everybody in Jacksonville is okay. All right. So as far as Vancouver goes, yeah, they got Parker Alcos in the sixth round. Really good value. Yeah. But this is the thing with Carolina. They lost 12 free agents. They only signed 5. And the only one. This is the Dom Waddell effect, Joey. I think it's the Dom Waddell effect. The falling out of Dom Waddell leaving the Hurricanes as general manager and going to Columbus. I think this is the fallout effect of Dom Waddell leaving Carolina. Them losing 12 free agents and only being able to re-sign 5. And they overpaid 4 of those guys not named Jacob Slavin, their first line defenseman. So I think this is the fallout effect of losing Dom Waddell. Now, only time will tell if I'm correct in that prediction, Joey, but I think it's the fallout effect. We'll see. And, you know, well, yeah. Carolina's GM Dom Waddell left the team to go to Columbus. But some of these decisions that the assistant GM, interim GM made have been so bad. I'm wondering if Dave Tepper is secretly running the Carolina Hurricanes in addition to the Carolina Panthers. Some of these decisions the Hurricanes that have made this offseason are that bad. Where I'm actually wondering if Dave Tepper is running things in. Because that's how it was with Dom Waddell when he first got to Carolina, because he took over for Ron Francis. And he did great after learning under Ron Francis. But the same cannot be said with Waddell's assistant. Yeah. Elliot Wolf has done a nice job for the Patriots. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Carolina, Vancouver, they're still going to be playoff teams, but I really don't feel like either team did enough to move the needle and assert themselves as Stanley Cup contenders next season. Dallas is an interesting spot. They did quite a bit. Matt Duchene, 1 year, $3 million. He had 60 points. He made $7 million last year. They were able to get him for $3 million. Dumba signs a 2 year, $7.5 million deal. Same guy who injured Pavelski in last year's playoffs, 2023 playoffs. 2 year, $7.5 million deal with Dallas. Casey DeSmith, Canucks and Penguins backup, signs a 3 year, $3 million contract to be Jake Ottinger's backup. Ilya Lyubushkin, Toronto defenseman who had 160 blocked shots and 140 hits. 2 years, $6.5 million. Nils Lundqvist, 1 year, $1.25 million. Leon Bixel, a 6'5", 235-pound knock on your ass defenseman. He's going to be competing with these guys for a roster spot. Harley's an RFA. That's the only contract that hasn't been resolved yet. But I'm expecting that Harley contract to get resolved in the coming days. And, right now, I think the Dallas Stars, if Edmonton doesn't come out of the West, I think it will be Dallas, because Dallas has added more depth to where if Dallas and Edmonton were in opposite conferences, I would pick both teams to meet in the Stanley Cup. That's just how much better Dallas and Edmonton have gotten this year. I know we traded Fox away. I think Nil is trying to save cap space, but at the same time, I do feel like unless Colorado's fully healthy or unless Nashville gets home ice over us, I think Dallas is in a better spot than both teams at the moment. We'll see what happens because Dallas signing free agents with size. They're going for physicality, and they drafted well. They got Emil Hemming in round 1. They got a defenseman in round 5 that I liked, that I had a 4th-round grade on. And, yeah, Nilo Pekka Muhonen. But they've got 8 defensemen on their current roster, 2 defensemen that could be ready by the time 2027 rolls around. But, yeah, Kyrou, a 22 second-round pick, should be ready by 2026. And Bertucci might be ready by 2027 as a 2023 second-round pick. But, yeah, you have Fegaris, Aram, Minitan, but if Nico Pella Muhonen signs with Dallas after his contract in Sweden is up after this season, I mean, if the Finnish defenseman Muhonen signs with Dallas, then Dallas could have another prospect in their system. So I do think Dallas is in a good spot as far as their window goes, and they're going to have a ton of money to spend next offseason with Jamie Benn set to be UFA, some of their other guys set to be UFAs, but it also feels like Jim Nill is tweaking the team slightly because he doesn't want to put all that effort in and get swept, losing the conference finals for a 3rd year in a row. It does feel like Dallas is trying to go all in. It also feels like they're trying to be frugal with stopgaps until their draft picks are ready. Because that's the one thing that Dallas consistently gets right, the draft picks. And I feel like the Rangers reached in the draft Boilard in round 4 was a good value pick, but Rico Gradig in round 6 felt like a reach. But the Rangers, they went out, they got Riley Smith, the Penguins, and former Vegas Golden Knights winger. They signed Sam Carrick. They've been pretty frugal, the Rangers. I could see the Rangers in next year's Cup. It just depends. Edmonton's been aggressive. They get Savoy. They get Henrique back. Matthias Janmark is back. They got Jeff Skinner, Buffalo's 3rd-line left winger. They got Corey Perry back. Victor Arvidsson, the LA Kings second line right winger, is on their roster. He can play right wing or left wing. They got a lot of players back. Calvin Pickard is back at goalie. The backup goalie's back. Edmonton got a lot of talent back. I don't know if there's a team in the NHL that can beat Edmonton next year because they've got like 6 different lines of forwards if injuries occur. They've got 6 good lines of forwards and 4 good lines of defensemen. And most NHL teams, they'll have 3 good lines of defensemen if everyone's healthy. And the teams in rebuilds will have 2 good lines of defensemen. But Edmonton's got so much depth, it's not even funny. I think the Oilers have to be the favorite for next year. There are some people that have Florida repeating in the as far as the odds go. I'll pull up the Edmonton Oilers. Emil Vinny, Albin Sundin. Yeah, Oilers draft picks. Outside of Dalen Wakely, I really don't see a pick where I'm going, wow, that's a great pick. I don't get that vibe with Edmonton. I like the Zether pick. The Gorbunov pick reminded me of Gorbachev last week. Yeah, Florida Panthers. I didn't like their draft, but they have a good core around them. They brought back Anton Lundell, 6-year, $30 million. They brought in Nate Schmidt, former Winnipeg Vegas defenseman. Paul Maurice has coached him. They brought back Kulikov after losing Ekman Larson, after losing Montour. They brought back Sam Reinhart. He signed an 8-year extension. They brought back Sam Reinhart, first line right winger. They brought back Kulikov. They extended Lundell at center. So Sam Bennett's a UFA after this year. So is Carter Verhaeghe. They do want to re-sign both of them. Ekblad's also a UFA. Florida might have 1 year to repeat, but their window is going to close after next year if they don't repeat with all the players they're set to lose. And honestly, I feel like there's too much turnover as far as the blue line goes. I think the Rangers are better. I think the Bruins are better. The Maple Leafs are better. I like what Florida did. They still have enough talent to make the playoffs. I just don't see them repeating. It is so hard to go on a run like this. And if the Panthers get to another Stanley Cup run, it's going to take a toll on them like it did with the Lightning. That's all I'm going to say on that. But, Panthers are the Stanley Cup favorite in some betting sites for next year over the Oilers. It's still early, but I feel like Edmonton's done more this offseason to assert themselves as that team. But we'll see. Anything you want to add before I get to the NBA? NBA free agency as well as the NBA draft. We covered the lottery picks, and then we texted each other about the Heat's pick at 15, while we both liked the pick. So we will talk about the NBA draft, but I also want to get the NBA free agency tracker on Spotrac loaded up here, and then just get all the NBA transactions for the NBA. Just load that up here. So yeah, we're pretty much done covering. I'll quickly show you guys the. I am scrolling down because for anyone who missed our picks, basically what we're doing is basically I'm showing you the picks one more time, showing you the draft grades one more time on the live stream here, while the page loads. And I'm doing this as fast as I can. I'm not trying to rush, but you've had 2 hours to look at this. The link to the web page, it's on the homepage of our site. So really, you can go to the homepage. You'll see a link to the draft results page. So there's just a lot of NBA news I'm going to get to here in a second. But yes, there's just a lot. So yeah, Klay Thompson was the big move. Klay Thompson to Dallas. You want to talk about that before Klay Thompson's going to Dallas as a small forward. Yeah, and Donovan Mitchell, $150.32 million. This is what you were trying to tell me about earlier on the podcast. So Tatum got extended 5 years, $314 million. Klay Thompson, 3 years, $50 million. But those are the big dominoes. The Celtics brought back Derek White, but I wouldn't put that in the same ballpark as the Tatum signing. $314 million for Boston. It does have a 2030 player option in that contract. Paul George and Maxey are both on the 76ers. Valanciunas goes to the Wizards. Caldwell Pope goes to the Magic. I mean, Chris Paul is now on the Spurs with Stephon Castle and some of the players they drafted. So I do think it's going to get very interesting. But I would say Tatum's the biggest of those three. But I would say short term, the most team friendly of those is probably the Donovan Mitchell extension. And people are going to say the Klay Thompson deal's friendly, 3 years, $50 million. True, but he's past his prime, and Thompson's was a 2 his entire career. Now he's moving to the 3. I don't know how he'll transition to that role. So we'll have to wait and see on that. He owns a minority stake in the Cavs. Utah never should have traded him away, but they did. Utah should have kept him, but they were like, this contract, it's too lofty. And they moved him. Because you got all these idiots on ESPN screaming, blow up the damn team after one bad playoffs. And instead of doing your due diligence, you choose to listen to those people instead of trusting that Mitchell's going to rebound. And he's had over 20 points a game every year in his career. I liked Colin Sexton, but Mitchell was an upgrade over him, and Utah looks foolish for trading him away. It was Mitchell. In 2020, 2021, or 2021, 2022, I believe the Utah Jazz were the number one seed in the 2021 NBA playoffs. I believe the Jazz were the number one seed that year. I want to double check that really quickly here. I want to double check that. Yeah, the Jazz were the number one seed that year. They got knocked out by the Clippers in round 2 with Donovan Mitchell putting together an MVP season with the Jazz as the top seed. The Jazz went from being the number one seed in the West to losing the Mavericks in the first round as a 5 seed in 2022. So that's why they moved on from Mitchell. And I remember in 2022, you had all these people on ESPN like Wilbon and stuff saying, Utah Jazz need to blow up the damn team. Trade Donovan Mitchell away and blow up the damn team. Because you listen to those guys, instead of trusting Mitchell to rebound, you fucked up a good thing. Yeah, I mocked Donovan Mitchell, the Pistons in 2017, and they took Luke Kennard. I also mocked Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, the Pistons, before they traded their pick away to the Clippers for Blake Griffin. So, I mean, if the Pistons had just listened to me, they would have had two-star guards, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who's second in MVP voting, and Donovan Mitchell. They'd both be Pistons, and that would be a much better roster than the one you currently have now. No offense, it's not like I believe the Cavs head coach is now the new Pistons head coach. Yeah. 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 Yep. I'm going to get to the NBA draft now because it feels like we've already gone over most of the free agent signings. The Sixers got Jared McCain at 16 out of Duke. He's going to be a backup to Tyrese Maxey. I'm really not going to go into in depth with that. And I felt like there were better players on the board, so I gave the Sixers a C grade. I was very happy the Lakers got Dalton Nett. I mean, it's been a banner year for my teams, Joey. The Patriots got Drake May. Dallas Stars got the best player on the board at their pick. The Lakers got the best player on the board at their pick. And the LA Sparks got the best player on the board at their pick. It just comes down to the Guardians not fucking up. And all of my teams will have drafted the player I'd be happy with at number one. And basically, the Guardians are the only team that can ruin my perfect draft year. And I'm going to have to issue a public apology to Jay Crawford and everybody at 92.3 The Fan if the Guardians screw up and I end up jinxing them because all of my teams have had perfect drafts. I'm going to have to actually go on television like LeBron when he made the decision and issue a public apology if that happens. So I had him at 8 to the Spurs. He goes to the Lakers at 17. I'm very happy with that. It's a perfect draft for my teams in the first round. When I say perfect draft, I mean perfect draft in terms of value. I'm not saying the careers are perfect. I'm saying it's a perfect draft right now in the summer of 2024, heading into the season. On paper, it looks like a perfect draft year, but it comes down to the Guardians not screwing up at number one. Patriots got a good player. The Stars got a good player at 29. The Lakers got a good player at 17. The Sparks got two good players in the WNBA draft. The Guardians have the number one pick, and if they get a good player at number one, this might cap off a perfect draft year for all of my favorite sports teams as a fan, and that makes me very happy. And we're going to get to that next week on the podcast when I upload the final mock draft. But the Dalton Connect, Tennessee, I am leaning Bazana at number one, though. I've heard 15 out of 20 GMs expect Bazana to go to the Guardians, and the other five have JJ Weatherholt, West Virginia, second baseman / shortstop, going number one. I'm thinking it's Bazana. But I think Bazana is going to go number one. He's a second baseman for Oregon State. I think he's going to go number one. Daniel Sheeman's a utility player. That's what Wikipedia says. He's not a starter. He is a utility player. Sheeman, the backup, he's a utility player. And Andres Gimenez, as much as I like Gimenez, I'm on MLB.com. I'm on MLB.com reading Gimenez. 252 batting average, 5 home runs. Those are not great numbers. I think Bazana's an upgrade over him, and he can play left field as well as center field. And you can move him to shortstop. You know, Jimenez played shortstop. Before he signed with the Guardians. So you can move him to shortstop and draft Bazana. That's what I'm thinking. Okay, Jimenez, that's my thought process. Because he was a shortstop on the Mets before the Guardians got him in the Lindor trade. He was the Mets starting shortstop before the Guardians got him in the Lindor trade. So he can play. I think he moves to shortstop and Bazana moves to second base. That's basically the thought process. So you upgrade 2 positions in the infield. You have Jose Ramirez at third base, so you're good. But yeah, that's what I'm thinking for that. But the reason why J.J. Weatherholt is projected to go number 1 is because he's a shortstop, and because if you keep Jimenez at second base, the thought process is Weatherholt out of West Virginia, but he couldn't even hit a home run against Pitt at PNC Park, and Pitt's baseball team's awful. So that's kind of why I don't want him at number 1. Yeah. .407 batting average for Bazana, 28 home runs. 28 home runs for Bazana. Fielding percentage of .970. I think Bazana's going to go number 1. Yeah, Bazana and Jimenez. And that's the thing. Bazana's gonna have chemistry with the Guardians because Quan went to Oregon State as well. But yeah, Stephen Quan went to Oregon State, so he will have chemistry with them. And his agent's not Scott Boras. But yeah, I'm gonna get back to the NBA here. Magic, I like the Tristan da Silva pick at 18 for depth at power forward. They've already got Banchero, but da Silva's a combo forward. He can play off the bench. Jacoby Walter, I do think he is a good backup to RJ Barrett, who got traded to Toronto. Jalen Tyson was number 1 on the Cavs board. I gave this a B+ because I thought there were better value picks on the board. But to be fair, he was the top player on the Cavs board. I don't hate the pick, but I felt like there were better players available. Yevs Missy went to the Pelicans at 21. the Baylor center. He went 21st to the Pelicans. Deron Holmes II, the Dayton power forward, who I had in my top 15. The Nuggets trade up for him. They get a good bench player. AJ Johnson of Illawarra had no business going at 23, 2.9 points per game. I like Dylan Jones to Oklahoma City. Terrace Shannon Jr. went to the Timberwolves at 27. That was a good pick. Isaiah Collier's a backup to Clarkson, isn't bad value, and Baylor Shireman at 30. But there was a lot less excitement in the back half of round one compared to the top half of round one. It was really Dalton Nett, Jacoby Walter to Toronto, and Deron Holmes to Denver, Terrence Shannon to Minnesota. And maybe the Cavs pick, if you're a fan of that pick, you could get behind it. But it was not, the back half of round one of the NBA draft wasn't really as exciting as the top half for me. But you want to add anything before I get to some of the round two picks? I'm not going to do a deep dive on all of them, but I'll mention the first couple of picks. Jalen Thompson, the Cavs pick at 20, can shoot, but he really doesn't bring much else to the table. I gave it a B+. I don't hate the pick, but it does address a need if you want to move Struss into a bench role. Yep. Yep. Yeah, I gave the Cavs a B plus. To be fair, I'm sure there were people that gave them a C. I'm sure there were people that gave them a C, D plus that were a lot harsher than I was on the pick, but I gave it a B plus. Yeah, I agree with that. If you're a Cavs fan and you like the fact that they drafted for need, you can argue A minus or even A. You can disagree with me slightly. That's fine. But I think B plus value, I think that's a fair grade because he was expected to go in the mid to late 20s. He went in the early 20s. He went right at 20. So he played shooting guard and small forward at college, but he's 6'6", 215. I had him going to Milwaukee as a backup to Middleton at small forward, but you know, I figured, yeah. I don't know why people are upset. It's interesting because I had Mogbo falling to Toronto at 31 in my mock, and that's who they took because I saw Mogbo's interview. This is a guy who had 9 rebounds, 9 points, 10 rebounds. I think he had 15 double doubles. And he had 20 games where he had 9 points, 10 rebounds, or 9 rebounds, 10 points. And he had 15 double doubles in 34 games. The consistency was there in spades. He had the motor, and he talked about even though Jonathan Mogbo is only 6'7", 217, he talked about the importance of foot speed and using fast feet against much bigger players like Joel Embiid and Jokic. That is and he talked about how he's an energy guy. So I thought that interview Mogba was really good. So that's a big reason I mocked him to Toronto, and that's who they ended up picking. I look for players that have complete game. Short range, medium range, long range. Can they pass? Make good decisions while passing? Can they defend? Can they defend multiple positions, or do they just defend with their athleticism? Can they rebound? Can they steal the ball? Can they high point the ball? I'm looking for a player that does everything at a high level, but it's harder to find that as the draft progresses. Yeah, but Kyle Filipkowski fell the second round. He was in my top 20. Apparently, he's with someone who's like much older than him that was like 28 when he was 20. So he fell to the Jazz as a result. I love the Juan Nunez pick by the Spurs in round 2. Bobby Klitman, a Jay Mitchell, a point guard, a UC Santa Barbara that Jordan told me about, fell to round 2. Jalen Wells fell to round 2. Ade Mara fell to round 2. Sixers went for value over need, though, in the draft. That's what really pissed me off about their draft, because they had a chance to get really good talent. And even though the Cavs may have reached in terms of value at 21 slightly, not majorly, but slightly, they still drafted for need, whereas the Sixers entered the draft needing multiple starters. They did bring in Paul George, but outside of Paul George, they didn't bring in two forwards, and Paul George is going to play the two at shooting guard. So they've got Maxey, they've got Embiid, and they've got Paul George, and they neglected the forward position in the draft and let their two starting forwards walk and just add a depth at point guard and center. That's not going to cut it. If you're Philadelphia, that's not going to cut it. Yeah. I think James Harden was the 76ers shooting guard last year. So basically, no, James Harden was the Clippers shooting guard, but he went from the 76ers to the Clippers. And I feel like that's kind of what you're getting with Paul George now. You're getting Harden with his last 2 years with the Sixers with Paul George. 58 games played, 20 points a game. That is basically what you're getting with him. They gave him a 4 or 5 year contract, but the thing is, after the first 2 years of that contract, his play is going to dip. And it already dipped from 23.8 to 22.6 this past season. So that's the big thing I'm looking at here. I believe Paul George can have 22.4 points a game, but I don't think he matches the 22.6 he posted with the Clippers, and he declined from 23.8 to 22.6. I still think he can put up 22 and a half. I just don't think he's going to put up 22.6. And he had a historically good 41.3 three-point percentage last year. I don't think that's going to improve next season. That's probably going to go down to like 38, 36%. So, but yeah, what else do we add here from the MLB draft next week? Because it's 1:04 p.m. I am getting kind of, what else do we need to talk about on the show today? Because I feel like we've hit all the topics as far as the NHL and NBA free agency goes. Don't worry, I've got 3 more shows. Next Saturday's the MLB draft. Yeah, next Saturday's the MLB mock draft. Next Sunday's the MLB draft stream, and then 2 weeks from today, Joey and I will recap every draft over the last 10 years for NFL, NHL, NBA, MLB, and MLS, and we're going to rank them from strongest to weakest. I've already got my rankings ready, and, Joey can, if he has a counter argument or if he disagrees with my order, he can reorder by draft here. But yeah, that is coming up in 2 weeks from today, because since it's our 10th year podcasting together, I figured we'd end the season doing something fun like that, where we go through all the draft classes, and I'll give you guys a preview of 2025's draft classes at the very end of that show before we sign off for season 13 of Draft Utopia on July 20th, 2 weeks from today. And don't worry, we will be back for season 14 2 weeks from July 20th, and about 4 weeks from today. So yeah, that's pretty much going to cover it here on TalkShoe and Restream. Anything you want to say to our audience before we sign off, Joey? All right, have fun and enjoy your weekends. Okay, we got something in the chat room here. MD Ismail, sound no seller. Seller is clear, I believe, correct? Okay, so we do have a Stream Rise custom settings. Okay, so thank you guys for the comments in the chat room. I didn't see them earlier, but yeah, we are signing off. We'll be back next week. I appreciate MD. I looking forward to our Zoom call on Thursday, so that'll be fun. But yeah, I'm Chris Ransom. That was Joseph Potter just over on TalkShoe, and we'll be back next Saturday to break down the 2024 MLB draft. The Cleveland Guardians are on the clock. The Cincinnati Reds, the other team in the state of Ohio, is on deck.